Hi, my name's Jason and I build electric skateboards. Over the last few years, I've become the expert on making electric skateboards. It's taken lots and lots of research, lots of reading, lots of testing, lots of trial and error. And in this video, I'm going to give you all the knowledge you need so you can buy the best electric skateboard. This is about educating people so they can make the best decisions about the best skateboards, cut through the marketing hype. I'm going to tell you the stuff that the manufacturers don't want you to know. So tune in and become an expert on electric skateboards. To understand an electric skateboard, you need some basic knowledge about voltage and wattage and power and how it all works together. A common spec you will see written on an electric skateboard is watts, or the wattage. 2000 watts, 1000 watts, 300 watts. What does this mean? So watts is simply voltage of the battery times the amps that the battery can output. Sometimes you'll see really high numbers, sometimes you'll see quite low numbers. Why is there a difference? Well, there are two ways you can say the watts or the rated watts. There can be the maximum wattage. There can be average wattage. Now, in marketing language, generally you'll go with the peak watt out. You don't really want to say this is a 300 watt electric skateboard when you can say it's a 2000 watt electric skateboard. The only reason you might want to tone it down a little bit is for laws, legislation, things like that say it cannot be over a certain amount. At the end of the day, to calculate wattage of a skateboard, it's voltage times amps. So if you've got a 36 volt battery and it's outputting 10 amps, that's 360 watts. If you've got the same battery and it's outputting 100 amps, it's 3600 watts or 3.6 kilowatts. Most electric skateboards never perform at their peak performance continuously. Generally, they'll peak during takeoff or a hill climb. But when you're cruising and you've got a pretty constant speed, the power consumption drops right down. So just bear that in mind when you're thinking about power and how much you're using. In fact, the ideal scenario is an electric skateboard that has low power consumption. Why do you want to use your battery any quicker? You know, the higher the watts, the more power it uses. So just bear that in mind. You want to buy an electric skateboard that is very efficient. You don't want it to use high watts all the time. You just want it there if it needs it, but when you're cruising, it should be a low power consumption. That's ideal. Knowing what the maximum or nominal voltage of the battery in your electric skateboard is really important. If you have that information, you can do other calculations and work out things like the motor kV, the maximum theoretical speeds. Always make sure you know how much voltage the skateboard has, and generally the higher the voltage, the better that skateboard will be, electrically speaking anyway, because the higher the voltage, the lower the average current draw. A lower voltage, like a 24 volt system, and you have a 36 volt system, and they're the exact same skateboard, and you drive them up a hill. The 24 volt system will draw more current out of the battery than the 36 volt system. And the more current you draw, the higher the heat. The motors can heat, motor controller can heat, the wires can heat, and the battery can heat. So lower voltage should be avoided if possible. Another common thing that you'll see written is watt hours. Watt hours are the nominal voltage times by the capacity of the battery. If you have 36 volt battery and it is 10 amp hours, if you times them together, that gives you watt hours. So it'll be 360 watt hours. Normally watt hours is calculated off nominal voltage, and it's a great way to calculate range. If you know the watt hours, you can fairly accurately estimate how much range you'll get out of an electric skateboard. The standard rule of thumb is 1 kilometer per 10 watt hours. If you see claims that are much greater than that in terms of range, I would question that. So let's just say this again. 1 kilometer is 10 watt hours. Okay, if you have a 300 watt hour battery pack, that is approximately 30 kilometers. Now this is a fairly good guide, but let's just bear in mind, if you're a heavier rider or if you're riding up lots of steep hills over and over again, you do use more power. So the amount of watt hours consumed per kilometer is going to increase. Let's get a bit more technical with some of the electronics. Firstly, let's talk about battery chemistry. The two most common kinds of battery that you will see, LiPo batteries or lithium ion batteries. Sometimes they won't even write what it is. And this is really, really important information. So if you're going to buy an electric skateboard, ask the supplier what battery chemistry. So let's break it down. LiPo, that's lithium polymer. LiPo is commonly used in the hobby industry for remote control cars and drones. It's a pretty affordable battery technology. It's got a big punch of power. Power to weight ratio in LiPo is very good and it's inexpensive. So no wonder the hobbyists love using that. The other option is lithium ion, widely used in high quality cordless drills. In electric skateboards, they are also becoming quite popular. And it's important to know the difference because lithium ion is just a generic term that can cover lots of subcategories of that chemistry. Best chemistry to have, lithium ion with nickel and manganese mixed together in there. What this does is improve safety, improve performance. So battery chemistry is a really complex topic, but it pays to pay attention to this spec. Know your chemistries, look out for lithium ion MNCs. They are the best in terms of safety and performance, and they have much greater life expectancy in terms of their charge cycle. So they might be more expensive up front, but their cost per charge is lower. So don't get tricked by the false economy. The cheapest battery might not actually be the cheapest. So what's a BMS? BMS is a battery management system. It's a special circuit board designed specifically to pair with the battery and manage its discharge and its charge. A lot of LiPo batteries you buy from the hobby store, for instance, won't have this built in. Other things like battery temperature is something that a BMS can manage, and it can have a built-in shutdown feature to protect the battery if it starts overheating, which often happens with a LiPo battery. If you discharge it very rapidly, it can actually damage it, but without a BMS, it doesn't shut down, it doesn't get protected. So the BMS is very important and should be included into the electric skateboard ecosystem to give you a total solution that's reliable and safe. So what's an ESC? The ESC has got to be the most important part in the electric skateboard electronics ecosystem. The ESC is like the brain. In simple terms, it takes the power that's in the battery and controls the flow of it into the motors based on what you do with your accelerator. Now, they're not all equal. You can get an ESC that's designed to control a toy car, for instance, and you can buy it at the hobby store. You can use that on your electric skateboard, plug your batteries in, plug your motor in, and off you go. And in many cases, it will work. But the thing is, with a hobby grade ESC, they're never designed to have a human load on it. If you put a human load on your toy remote control car and try to drive around, what do you think would happen? Maybe something would break down, maybe you'd have problems with overheating. So not all ESCs are the same. What you need to think about with the electronic speed controller is what are the advanced algorithms that are built into it? What control functions does it possess to ensure your battery is not over discharged, your motors are spinning most efficiently? Everything comes together, and it's often in algorithms and formulas that are running inside a processor. This is an ESC here, and it's got a tiny little processor. It's constantly doing calculations, based on the motor's RPM, the load, the current that's flowing through it from the battery. It needs to calculate whether more current's required based on the accelerator. There's a lot of stuff going on here. This particular one has a lot of advanced features. Plug it into a computer, control the current from the battery. You can control the current in the motor and balance them between each other. You can also tell it where the voltage limits should be from the battery, just to make sure that everything is controlled and ideally keeping everything in the safe working level. This particular one has temperature sensors on it to measure the MOSFET temperatures. So some advanced features are really important in your ESC. So one thing to think about when you're buying an electric skateboard is the ESC. What one are they using? Is it something just generic off the shelf, or has it been developed to carry a human? If not, think twice. So this is a favorite question that I often get asked. How many motors do I need on my electric skateboard? The myth about electric motors is that they're increasing the speed. Adding an additional motor, so from 1 to 2, all that's doing is increasing the torque. Now with the additional torque you have, yeah, you can capture that torque using a gearing system, for instance, and you can convert it into a higher top speed. But an extra motor is just extra torque. Another thing you should know about dual motors is it actually improves handling performance. You might not think about it, but when you accelerate and you have just a single motor, it's one motor trying to push the entire load forward. And skateboard trucks, the way they steer is by changes of angles. Now, if you've got one motor driving one side of the truck, you can get torque steering. If you have two motors and it's equal drive forward, the truck's not moving and it's not trying to shift your balance or anything, so you'll get a much better takeoff. You'll have double the traction, double the torque, and no torque steer. So that's a huge benefit of dual motors. The flip side of that is with two motors, yes, you've got more traction for taking off and accelerating, but it also works during braking. So with two motors there, when you apply an electric brake on an electric skateboard, two motors are gripping and providing resistance, and that is your brake. If you had just one motor and you apply the brake, it's just one wheel and its traction on the ground, that's the braking force that you get. Two motors is double. So, should you buy an electric skateboard with one motor or two? Well, the simple way to work it out, if you weigh over 80 kilograms and you want to go up steep hills, one motor is probably not enough. Go for two. So what about wheel size? Is it important? Does it make a difference to performance? It does. You can't just take an electric skateboard and put a bigger wheel on it and expect it to perform in the exact same way. I've seen videos of guys putting really big wheels on a booster board. There's a chance that that's going to cause problems. The larger the diameter of the wheel, the greater the top speed, assuming you don't change the motor, the battery, the gearing. If you just change the wheel, the skateboard goes faster. Unfortunately, you lose torque. There's a chance that your hill climbing performance will diminish. There's a chance that the amount of power you're consuming or the current draw will increase, because that's how a motor gets torque and current are essentially the same thing in a motor on an electric skateboard. So if you increase the wheel size to get a greater top speed, you're basically asking for a higher, more current, and all this means is unreliable, a greater chance of things failing. So just think about that. So speed versus torque. An electric skateboard is generally about 1 meter long. It's generally about that high off the ground. It has 4 wheels. There are physical restrictions that prevent you building something that can go 100 kilometers an hour and still have enough torque to go up the steepest hill. They aren't features that can be incremental side by side. You can't keep increasing speed and have good torque for hill climbing and fast acceleration. There's got to be a balance. For me, when I build an electric skateboard, I generally go with about 45 kilometers an hour. There are a few reasons for this. That's about the maximum speed I feel comfortable riding in an urban environment. Any faster and it gets a bit scary. Things can come out of nowhere and you need time to react. So 45 kilometers for me, is just where I like to ride at a maximum. But it's also a good amount of speed because you've still got tons of torque, especially in a dual drive system. At that speed, you can still build a system that goes up the steepest hills very easily. There's only so many things that you can over-engineer and overbuild to give you torque and speed. So really, really fast electric skateboards, unfortunately, are going to be horrible at starting, hill climbing, and generally they're going to run really hot. So just think about that. What is the actual speed you need to travel? Rider weight is the most important thing to think about when you're buying an electric skateboard. And it's rarely considered, in my opinion. I don't think many people think about it. Essentially, the weight of the rider is the load on the motors. The heavier the rider, the greater the load. Make sure you check for the specs on any electric skateboard. What is the maximum rider weight? If it says like 60 or 70 kilos or less, probably looking at a toy designed for kids. I'm about 95 kilos. I need to build my skateboards so I can accelerate up hills and go really quickly and not have a hot system. Motors can only move so much load before they fail. The more load a motor tries to move, the greater the current draw. It will keep drawing current, heating up, and drawing current and heating up until the load is no longer there. If the load never goes away, the heat never goes away, the current will stay high, and your system will eventually prematurely fail. Electronics don't like being hot. Motors don't like being constantly loaded. Design your drivetrain to work effectively in a given environment with a given load. If you don't do that, the product will not work. Important safety things that must be included in all electric skateboards. Now, getting this information out of your supplier could be really difficult, but it's super, super important. Number one, current limiting. You need to control the current. The battery's not smart. It just keeps dumping power and it will dump it rapidly. And generally what happens is fire. Without current control, you generally will either damage your battery, either discharging it too rapidly, it may swell up, it may overheat. Worst case scenario, the board just catches on fire. The other feature that goes hand in hand with current limiting is temperature limiting. Something that measures the temperature, whether it's the motor temperature, the battery temperature, the ESC temperature, or all of the temperatures, and has built-in cutoff and safety mechanisms. The idea here is that with these safety things built in, you can't destroy your electronics. And that's the most expensive stuff in a skateboard. If you want your skateboard to last a really long time, if you don't want your battery to fail, if you don't want your ESC to catch on fire or your motors to melt, you need current limiting and temperature control. The top three things really good electric skateboards must have. They must have the best battery technology and battery chemistry. The cheap stuff is no good. It will not last. It will cause you problems. It will catch on fire, just like the hoverboard issues worldwide. Now those things are banned. The cost per recharge will be much lower. The battery will last much longer. You will have hassle-free operation. A very well-designed drivetrain. You can't just mix and match stuff, really. You know, it took me so long to work this out. My first boards, why are they failing? What's going on? I was just grabbing hobby stuff this, hobby stuff that battery, bang, should work. And the thing is, it will work. It will work, but it won't work well. If you want a really good electric skateboard, the drivetrain needs to be perfected. Now, when I talk about drivetrain, I'm not talking about a wheel or a motor, or I'm talking about the ecosystem, the battery, the electronics, the motor. The whole electronic system has to be designed to work in an environment that it will be used in. If you don't do this, it will not be a good electric skateboard. Go with the best. Go with a system that is proven to be good. Otherwise, you'll have problems. Advanced motor controllers, the ESC. This is so important. If you want it to be safe, be reliable, if you want it to work really well, the ESC is super important. So ask questions about it. Like I said, current limiting, temperature controls, those sorts of things. Ask the manufacturer, what does it do? What safety things are built into it? Let me summarize the 3 most important things. Battery chemistry, very well designed drivetrain, a great ESC, something that's advanced with programmable functionality that's got safety cutoff features. The only thing you need to see before you buy an electric skateboard is a video of it taking a rider up a hill. The idea is to be able to go up a hill. A normal skateboard without motors and batteries is much cheaper, and they're really efficient. They'll roll for a very long time on flat, and downhill they go obviously very well. The only reason you would buy an electric skateboard is to go up hills or to travel long distances rapidly. A video of a skateboard going a long distance, once an electric skateboard is rolling, the load on the motors is very minimal. So the only real test is, can it go up a hill with a rider on it? Thank you for watching this video. It was very long, but lots of info. Please share it, please subscribe. If there's any questions about this information or you want to have a chat about it, go to the electric skateboard forum, electric-skateboard.builders. Go there. Otherwise, comment below and subscribe. Thank you.